Senator from Ohio is recognized.
Madam President, I come to the floor for the opposite reason. I'm thrilled to rise to urge my colleagues in support of Rohit Chopra to serve as the next director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I've seen the good work they used to do. They used to have an Ohio director. The first director there, Richard Cordray, a friend of mine, somebody who stood up for consumers pretty much every day of his work life. Rohit Chopra will become the CFP director at a time when far too many Americans feel like the system is rigged against them. You hear these reports about billionaires not paying taxes. You hear these reports about record profits on Wall Street. You see the influence. Just, check down the hall, Madam President. Look down the hall. You can see the influence in the minority leader's office, Senator McConnell, of lobbyists going in and out, always getting their way. When a Republican freight train goes down the rails, goes down the rail bed full of tax cuts, it never stops. I mean, it's always about helping those in charge get wealthier. And the CFPB director Rohit Chopra will be here when people feel like no matter how hard they work, they don't get a fair shot in this country. And his job will be on the side of the public. His job will be on the side of workers. I know the presiding officer, she sees this job, as I do, as putting workers at the center of our country, at the center of our economy, at the center of our work here. The senator from Georgia sees the country in the same way, putting workers at the center of our agenda. That's not happened until we had this new president. Now with Rohit Chopra, we have a chance to turn this around. The public's watched the largest corporations amass enormous power, use it to gain access and influence in this town to write the rules in their favor. And again, I won't open the door to show you again, Mr. President, but you look down that hall and you see the people going in and out of the Republican leader's office. They're always gaining access, always gaining influence, always writing the rules in their favor. So it's not surprising that most people don't believe there's anyone on their side fighting for them in the federal government. But we know that's not true. That's why I know Rohit Chopra will prove them wrong, that he'll fight for all those that feel like they've been left on their own. Even before the pandemic, hard work wasn't paying off. We all know that productivity has gone up in this country in the last many years. We know executive compensation has skyrocketed. We know the stock market's gone up, but you know what we also know? And what people feel every day? They feel like their wages have been stagnant. They feel like they're working harder and harder in Savannah or in Columbus, Georgia, or in Cincinnati or Columbus, Ohio. They know they're working harder and harder every day, and they're simply not getting ahead. They feel that they've been left on their own. Meanwhile, productivity up, wages stagnated. Meanwhile, we know the cost of housing, the cost of childcare, the cost of higher ed, the cost of prescription drugs. They all go up. 40% of Americans aren't able to come up with $400 in an emergency. A quarter of the renters in this country, Mr. President, before the pandemic, 1/4 of renters paid more than half their income in rent. And you know what happens there. You're paying half your income in rent. Your car breaks down, your daughter gets sick, you miss a couple days of work from a workplace injury, your life changes. It goes upside down. You can get evicted. Then the coronavirus hit. Millions of workers who were one emergency away from draining their savings turn to a payday lender. They're getting evicted. They face emergencies all at once. Millions of homeowners now have fallen behind in their mortgage or are at risk of foreclosure. 1 in 6 Latino homeowners, 1 in 5 African-American homeowners. Through it all, we've seen COVID-related scams emerge, scams that use a global pandemic as a means to cheat their fellow Americans. I mean, there's always somebody out there. Most of us aren't that way. Most of us in the Senate, most of us in this country aren't that way. But there's always somebody out there that will scam their fellow Americans, 500,000 Americans as a result. 500,000 Americans, that's a lot of people. 500,000 Americans reached out to the CFPB last year seeking help. That's 54% more than in 2019. Record numbers of consumers complained about errors on their credit reports or harassment by debt collectors. Those Americans need someone willing to stand up to the biggest banks, to stand up to the most powerful corporations and fight for them. Rohit Chopra has the expertise and the track record to do that. and he will be America's voice and America's advocate. He has a deep understanding of financial markets, a strong record of protecting consumers and workers and small businesses, promoting competitive markets, holding bad actors accountable. 2018, this body, this Senate, voted unanimously, that's all of us, voted unanimously to confirm Rohit Chopra as an FTC commissioner. They voted unanimously. In the Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee, used to just be called the Banking Committee because it was all about Wall Street. Now the word housing is in capital letters on that committee. That committee, a few weeks ago, all 12 Republicans voted against Rohit Chopra. Everybody here voted to confirm him when he was at to go to the FTC. I don't know if any Republicans in this body are going to vote for him now. It's really kind of shocking. He's worked with members of both parties on a wide array of issues important to American consumers. As a commissioner, he worked with Democratic and Republican state attorneys general to protect American small business and consumers from foreign goods that were flooding the market with fake Made in the USA labels. I work on this issue a lot. My colleague, Senator Portman from Ohio, he and I worked together to strengthen in the bipartisan infrastructure bill to strengthen Buy America provisions stronger than they've ever been, so that, Mr. President, we won't see a project like the Bay Bridge in California, Northern California, made entirely with steel produced by Chinese companies, all part of the Chinese Communist Party. We're not going to see that again. We're going to see what Made in USA means. And Mr. Chopra's job, in part, something that his predecessor didn't do, will enforce Made in USA. If a company puts Made in USA on a label, they should hear from the government. You just can't commit that kind of fraud. In my state, Ohioans look for Made in USA because they want their dollars to support our economy. They know it also means a quality product, and it means made by American workers. He's led the FTC's recent crackdown on big tech. Americans across the political spectrum are concerned about these huge tech corporations that seem to get bigger and bigger and to control more and more of their lives. Mr. Chopra authorized the agency's current lawsuit against Facebook. This is what he did in the last job he was in when he got unanimous support in this body for confirmation. He stood up for Amazon drivers when the company stole more than $60 million. Imagine Amazon, maybe the most successful corporation, certainly one of the largest corporations in the world, stole $60 million in tips of workers making $9, $10, $11, $12 an hour. And they're not getting away with it. I mean, maybe they got away with it before. They didn't get away with it because Rohit Chopra was there. Banks aren't going to get away with that kind of stuff. Payday lenders won't get away with that kind of stuff. These fintech, all kinds of people that try to defraud American consumers, they're not going to get away with this because Rohit Chopra is going to be the cop on the beat. During his prior time, when he worked with Richard Cordray at the CFPB, he served as the agency's first student loan ombudsman. He looked out for students in the $1.7 trillion student loan market. 1.7 trillion, that's 1.7 thousand billion, $1.7 trillion student loan market. He worked with state attorneys general of both parties to bring enforcement actions against scammers that preyed on students drowning in student loan debt. I see the pages on both sides sitting here on the steps. Many of them are going to school in the next couple of years or going to college. Many of them will take student loans. Many of them they'll attempt to be preyed on by some of these scammers. And I'm guessing every one of these pages here, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, whether they're sponsored by Chuck Schumer or Mitch McConnell or me or Rob Portman, I'm guessing every one of you would vote for the confirmation if you could vote. Sorry, you're not even old enough to vote yet, but if you could, you would vote for Rohit Chopra because he's going to protect you. He's going to protect you when people try to scam you on your student loans. His commitment to protecting service members has been particularly important. He uncovered a predatory lending scheme. He was able to return more than $60 million to them or their families. I mean, think about that. People are trying to scam our service members. The wife's away serving our country. The husband's home, and they try to scam the husband. The husband who worries about his wife every day overseas, and predatory lenders and others. That's why you need Rohit Chopra there to protect them. He's earned the endorsement of a bipartisan group of state attorneys general. He's supported by a broad coalition of 150 consumer groups, civil rights groups, labor groups, public interest groups, and small business organizations. They know, like I do, that with Mr. Chopra leading the CFPB, Americans can be confident they'll have someone looking out for them. Corporations, big banks, payday lenders, they all have high-priced lobbyists. You see them going in and out of Senator McConnell's office. We know that. They have an outsized voice in this town. Most people don't have lobbyists. I just introduced a bill to help those on SSI. They're the lowest income people, averaging $500 a month in income. They didn't have a voice. They hadn't been heard from in 20 years until Congress did it. The same with people that Rohit Chopra will be paid to protect. They don't have lobbyists. They don't have a PAC. They certainly don't have a super PAC. They're not able to unleash tens of millions of dollars of dark money to win elections. They don't have an expensive lawyer they can get on the phone with a bank or a credit card company if something goes wrong. That's why we created the CFPB, to fight for them, to be a voice for ordinary people, and soon Americans will have Rohit Chopra on their side. If you were scammed by a payday lender, if you were overcharged by a bank, if you took an unfair hit on your credit report, it doesn't matter whom you voted for, what state, doesn't matter who your Senate sponsor is, if you're a page, it doesn't matter whom you voted for, it doesn't matter what state you live in, you need help. You want someone on your side, Rohit Chopra will be on your side, he will stand up, he will be your advocate. That's why, as chair of the Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee, I enthusiastically support Mr. Chopra's nomination to serve as the next director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I urge all of my colleagues to support him. Mr. President,
Senator from Ohio is recognized.
I ask unanimous consent that all remaining post-cloture time be considered expired.
Is there an objection? Without objection. The questions on the nomination?